Hey everyone! Tonight we were traveling back thousands of years to a world before stone gave way to empire, to the age where bronze first gleamed in firelight. Not the age of pharaohs or kings carved in stone, but the lives of ordinary people, farmers, herders, smiths, and traders who built the fragile beginnings of civilization. Imagine waking in a reed hut, the cool damp of morning still clinging to the earth floor. Smoke curls from clay hearths, goats bleat in pens along the village path, and water jars are carried heavily from the river. In the distance, a shrine rises on a hill, where offerings of grain and oil are left for gods of sun and storm. This is the Bronze Age, a time of work and want, of fields bent beneath barley harvests, of hands steady at the potter's wheel, of metal glowing in the smith's forge. It was an age of barter and belief, of hunger and fear, of dawns filled with both hardship and hope. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always find it fascinating to see this small circle of listeners stretching across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe let the soft hum of a fan or fire play in the background, and let's step gently into the Bronze Age together, into the smoke, the hammer's ring, and the quiet endurance of the first settled lives. Part 1. The first light of settlement. Waking in a reed hut. The first light of dawn is not a sudden, bright event. It is a slow, quiet, and almost imperceptible seeping of a cool grey luminescence into the deep, profound darkness of the pre-dawn world. We are not in a world of glass windows or of neatly sealed rooms. We are inside a small, circular hut, a dwelling that is as much a part of the natural landscape as a bird's nest or a beaver's lodge. And it is here, in this simple, organic space, that our journey into the Bronze Age begins. You are waking. The first sensation is not of sight, for the inside of the hut is still a landscape of deep, impenetrable shadows. The first sensation is of the cold. It is a damp, earthy cold that seems to rise from the very ground beneath you. A cold that has settled deep into the earth during the long star-filled night. You are lying not on a soft raised bed, but on a simple mat of woven rushes laid directly on the hard, packed earth floor. The mat is thin, and the cold of the ground has seeped through it into your bones. You have been sleeping in the simple, knee-length woolen tunic that you wear during the day, and you pull the single, coarse, and slightly damp woolen blanket more tightly around your shoulders. The air you breathe is thick, and it is a complex and an ancient perfume. It is the smell of the earth itself, of the damp clay of the floor. It is the smell of the reeds and the rushes that make up the walls and the mattress, a faint, sweet, and slightly musty scent, like a riverbank in autumn. It is the smell of wood smoke, not from a living fire, but the cold, stale, and deeply ingrained scent of 1,000 previous fires that has permeated every fibre of the hut. And it is the smell of humanity, of the other sleeping bodies in this small enclosed space, a warm, animal, and deeply familiar scent. You begin to hear the first quiet sounds of the new day. From outside, there is the first, tentative, and then more confident crowing of a rooster, the ancient and the universal alarm clock of the agrarian world. You can hear the soft, rustling sound of the wind in the reed thatch of the roof above you. And from within the hut, you can hear the slow, deep, and rhythmic breathing of the other members of your family who are sleeping on their own mats around the central, cold hearth. A small child mutters in their sleep, a soft, dream-filled sound. You open your eyes. The world is beginning to take shape in the slow, gathering light. You can see the rough, textured walls of the hut, made of woven panels of reeds, the wattle, which have been daubed with a thick layer of river clay mixed with straw, and dung, the daub. The light is beginning to filter through the thousands of tiny, invisible cracks in this simple wall. You look up at the roof. It is a conical structure, a marvel of simple engineering, made of a thick, heavy layer of reed thatch laid over a framework of wooden poles. The peak of the cone is open to the sky, a single circular smoke hole through which the smoke from the hearth can, in theory, escape. Through this smoke hole, you can see a small, perfect circle of the lightening pre-dawn sky, a pale, pearly grey against the deep, black silhouette of the thatch. You sit up, and the woven rush mat crackles softly beneath you. The floor is cold and slightly damp to the touch. You are surrounded by the simple, essential objects of your life. In one corner, there are a series of large, handmade clay pots, their round, pregnant shapes holding the family's supply of grain, of water, of dried beans. Leaning against the wall are the simple tools of your trade, a wooden digging stick, its point hardened in the fire, a stone-bladed hoe, and if you are fortunate, a precious sickle with a blade of a new, magical, and incredibly valuable material, bronze. This is the world of the early Bronze Age. It is a world that is still deeply rooted in the Stone Age that preceded it. The foundations of life, the farming, the herding, the pottery, the weaving, are all ancient technologies that have been practiced for thousands of years, but something new has entered this world. The knowledge of how to smelt and to cast copper and tin into bronze has arrived, and this new, hard, and endlessly recyclable material is slowly but profoundly beginning to reshape the very fabric of human existence. You rise to your feet, your body stiff and cold from the hard floor. You are a member of a small, settled, and deeply vulnerable community. Your life is a constant and an often precarious negotiation with the natural world. Your existence is defined by the rhythm of the seasons, by the success or the failure of the harvest, and by the will of the powerful and the often terrifying gods who you believe control the sun, the rain, and the fertility of the earth. You are standing at the very dawn of a new day, and at the harsh and the beautiful dawn of what we now call civilization. The world is quiet, the air is cold, and the long, hard work of survival is about to begin again. Let your mind rest in the cool, damp, and profoundly peaceful quiet of this ancient, sleeping hut. Feel the rough texture of the woven mat, smell the earthy scent of the clay floor, and see the first, faint, and hopeful light of a new day filtering through the smoke hole in the roof. The morning fire. The hut is still shrouded in the cool, grey twilight of the pre-dawn, but a new and a vital ritual is about to begin. The family is stirring, their slow, sleepy movements a testament to the deep, penetrating cold of the night. And now the woman of the house, the keeper of the hearth, turns her attention to the most important and the most sacred task of the new day, the waking of the fire. The hearth is the absolute center of the Bronze Age home. It is not a decorative fireplace set into a wall. It is a simple, shallow, and often clay-lined pit in the very middle of the earthen floor. It is the hut's source of heat, of light, of cooked food, and of a deep, spiritual, and communal focus. The fire is the living, breathing heart of the family, and to let it die out completely is a sign of a terrible carelessness, a bad omen that can bring misfortune to the entire household. The fire from last night has not been extinguished. It has been carefully banked. The glowing embers have been pushed together and covered with a thick, insulating blanket of soft grey ash. The woman kneels on the cold, hard floor beside this small, grey mound. Her movements are slow, deliberate, and filled with a kind of reverence. She is performing a ritual that her own mother and 1,000 mothers before her have performed every single morning of their lives. She uses a simple, fire-hardened stick to gently rake away the top layer of the ash. She is like an archaeologist, carefully excavating a precious and a fragile treasure. As she clears the ash, a small, beautiful, and deeply welcome sight is revealed. A tiny, pulsing, and still living core of deep red embers glowing in the semi-darkness of the hut. The heart of the fire has survived the night. Now she must coax it back to life. She has a small, precious bundle of tinder which she has kept in the driest part of the hut. It might be a handful of dried moss, the fluffy down from a seed pod, or a piece of a special fungus, the tinder fungus, which is known for its ability to catch a spark. She places this tinder gently on top of the glowing embers, and then she begins to blow. She gets down on her hands and knees, her face close to the hearth, and she blows a long, slow, steady, and carefully controlled stream of air to the embers. This is a skill, an art. To blow too hard is to scatter the embers and the ash, and to extinguish the precious spark. To blow too softly is to do nothing. Her breath is the breath of life, and she is breathing life back into the sleeping heart of her home. For a few tense moments, nothing seems to happen. Then a thin, tentative wisp of white smoke begins to rise from the tinder. The smell is sharp, acrid, and full of a hopeful promise. The woman continues to blow, her breath now a little more forceful. The wisp of smoke becomes a thicker plume, and then a tiny, fragile, and almost magical orange flame flickers into life in the heart of the tinder. She has done it. The fire is reborn. She does not relax. She must now feed the new and the very hungry flame. She adds tiny, dry twigs one by one to the fire, building a small, delicate, and well-ventilated structure around the flame. The twigs catch, their crackling sound a cheerful and a welcome break in the morning silence. As the fire grows stronger, she adds larger sticks, and then finally, a few small and carefully split logs of the precious firewood that has been gathered and dried with such great effort. The fire is now a stable and a growing blaze. The light in the hut is transformed. The cold, grey twilight is pushed back by a warm, dancing and golden-orange glow. The deep, menacing shadows in the corners of the hut retreat, and the faces of the family, who have been watching this ancient ritual with a quiet, sleepy reverence, are now illuminated, their features softened and made beautiful by the firelight. The warmth begins to spread, a slow, welcome, and deeply comforting wave. It is a radiant warmth that seems to seep into the very bones, chasing away the deep, damp chill of the night. The smoke from the fire rises, a thick, grey column towards the smoke hole in the roof. But much of it eddies and swirls under the low ceiling, filling the hut with a thick and an inescapable haze that stings the eyes and catches in the throat. The smell of wood smoke, which was a cold, stale memory just a few minutes ago, is now a living, breathing, and an all-pervading presence. The morning fire is the true beginning of the day. It is the signal that the struggle against the cold and the dark has been won, at least for now. It is the centre around which the family will now gather to warm their hands, to cook their simple morning meal of porridge, and to plan the long, hard work of the day ahead. It is a daily and a sacred miracle of transformation, a small, domestic, and deeply human sun, kindled in the heart of the home by the patient and the life-giving breath of a woman. Let your mind be warmed by this ancient and this beautiful fire. The village path. The fire is lit, the simple morning meal of barley porridge has been eaten, and now, as the sun begins to climb above the horizon, the family steps out from the dark, smoky interior of their hut into the bright, cool and bustling world of the Bronze Age village. The village is waking up, and its life flows along the simple and the essential arteries of the village paths. Let us walk these paths. They are not the paved, orderly streets of a later town. They are simple, winding tracks of packed earth, worn into the landscape by the constant and the unchanging passage of bare human feet and the hooves of their livestock over generations. The paths are not straight, they meander, following the natural contours of the land and winding around the small, circular, and seemingly randomly placed huts that make up the village. The surface of the path is a rich and a complex texture. In the dry summer months, it is a fine, powdery dust that gets between the toes and coats the legs with a pale brown film. After a rain, it is transformed into a thick, deep, and slippery mud, a sucking, glutinous mire that clings to the feet and makes every step a small and a difficult struggle. The path is a living, breathing thing, its character changing with the weather, with the seasons. The paths are the stage for the daily and the communal life of the village. As we walk, we are surrounded by the sights, the sounds, and the smells of a world that is intimately connected to the earth and to its animals. The huts are clustered together, and between them are small fenced enclosures, the pens for the livestock. We hear the insistent bleating of a goat, the deep, placid lowing of a cow, the grunting of a pig rooting in the mud. The smell of the animals, a rich, pungent, and earthy aroma of dung and of warm, living bodies, is a constant and an inescapable part of the village atmosphere. The paths are a place of work. We see a group of women, their heads together, their hands busy, as they sit in the sun outside their hut. Grinding grain in a saddle, quern a large concave stone, their bodies rocking back and forth in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. We see a man, his face set in concentration, carefully chipping a new edge onto a flint axe head. The sharp, percussive clink of stone on stone, a sound that has echoed through human settlements for 100,000 years. The paths are a place of social interaction. A woman, on her way to the river with a large clay pot balanced on her head, stops to exchange a few words of gossip with a neighbour. Two old men sit on a log in the sun, their faces a wrinkled map of a long and a hard life, their quiet conversation a low and a barely audible murmur. Children, their bodies brown from the sun and streaked with dirt, run and shout and play in the paths, their games a miniature and a chaotic imitation of the adult world around them. A small, scruffy and very alert dog trots past, its nose to the ground, its tail wagging, a self-appointed and a very important guardian of the village's comings and goings. The paths are a boundary, a line between the safe, humanized space of the village and the wild, and the potentially dangerous world that lies beyond. The village is likely situated in a defensible position on a low hill or in the bend of a river, and it is likely to be enclosed not by a great stone wall but by a simple and a practical defensive structure, a ditch and a bank of earth, topped with a sturdy wooden palisade of sharpened stakes. The paths all lead to a single main gateway in this palisade, a gap that can be closed at night or in times of danger with a heavy wooden gate. To be inside this boundary is to be home, to be part of the community, to be safe. To be outside, it is to be in the world of the forest, of the spirits, of the wild animals, and of the other human communities, who are not always friendly. And so the village path is more than just a way to get from one place to another. It is the thread that stitches the fabric of the community together. It is the space where the private life of the hut becomes the public life of the village, where the individual becomes a part of the collective. It is a simple, muddy, and a profoundly human space. Let your mind walk these ancient earthy paths. Feel the cool, damp ground beneath your bare feet. Hear the simple, honest, and life-affirming sounds of the village waking up around you. The water jar. The sun is climbing higher in the sky, and the morning's first and most essential chore is at hand. A young woman emerges from her family's hut. In her hands, or more likely, balanced with a practiced and a seemingly effortless grace on her head, is a large and a beautifully shaped clay jar. Her destination is the river, the well, or the spring, and her task is one that has been performed by women in this same way for millennia. This is the journey for water. The water jar is one of the most important and the most personal objects in the Bronze Age household. It is a product of immense skill and of deep practical knowledge. It has been made by a local potter, a master of their craft. The clay has been dug from the riverbank, carefully cleaned of impurities, and mixed with a tempering material like sand or crushed pottery. To give it strength, it has been shaped not on a fast spinning wheel, but by the slow, patient, and incredibly skillful method of coiling the potter, building up the walls of the jar with long, snake-like ropes of clay, and then smoothing them with a piece of wood or a smooth stone. The jar is a work of art as well as a tool. Its surface is not a plain, undecorated brown. It is covered in intricate geometric patterns which have been incised into the clay with a sharp stick or a piece of bone when it was still soft. These patterns, chevrons, spirals, zigzags, are not just decoration. They are a form of language, a set of symbols that may have a deep spiritual meaning, or may be the signature of a particular village or a particular potter. The jar has been burnished, polished with a smooth stone until its surface has a low and a beautiful sheen. And then it has been fired not in a high-tech kiln, but in a simple open bonfire, a process that is fraught with risk, and which can easily result in the jar cracking and all the potter's work being lost. This beautiful and this precious object is now in the hands of the young woman. It is heavy, even when it is empty. When it is full of water, it will be a crushing and a deeply uncomfortable weight. She joins a small procession of other women and children, all carrying their own jars, on the path that leads out of the village and down to the water source. The journey for water is a communal and a social event. It is a time for the women of the village to gather, away from the men, to talk, to laugh, to share the news and the gossip of their lives. The sound of their voices, the chatter and the laughter, is a cheerful and a living part of the morning landscape. They reach the river. The water is cool, clear, and constantly flowing. It is the lifeblood of the village, the source of its drink, the reason for its very existence. The women wade into the shallows, their feet sinking into the cool, soft mud of the riverbed. They fill their jars, the sound of the water gurgling into the narrow necks, a beautiful and a deeply satisfying sound. The journey back to the village is a different matter. It is a slow, a difficult, and a silent struggle. The great water-filled jar is now an immense weight. The young woman settles it onto the roll of cloth on her head, finds her balance, and begins the slow, careful walk back up the hill to her home. Her neck and her back muscles are straining. Her movements are slow, deliberate, and graceful, a grace that is born of a deep and a hard-won strength. A single, careless stumble could mean the loss of the precious water, and worse, the shattering of the precious, and the almost irreplaceable jar. The water she is carrying is life. It will be used for drinking, for cooking the barley porridge, for mixing with the clay to make new pots, for giving to the thirsty livestock. It is a resource that is never, ever to be wasted. The idea of using water for a long, luxurious bath, or of leaving a tap running, is an absurdity that is beyond the wildest realms of the Bronze Age imagination. The water jar is a powerful symbol of the central and the often unsung role of women in this world. Their lives are a constant and a repetitive cycle of carrying, of fetching, of grinding, of cooking, of caring for the children and the home. It is a life of an immense and an often invisible labor. But it is this labor that is the true and the essential foundation upon which the entire and the much more celebrated world of the Bronze Age chieftain and the warrior and the smith is built. Let your mind rest on the quiet, graceful, and deeply powerful image of the woman with the water jar, the shrine on the hill. The life of the Bronze Age farmer is a life lived in a state of a profound and an almost constant anxiety. His existence is a fragile one, utterly dependent on the mysterious and the often terrifying forces of the natural world. A drought, a flood, a blight on the crops, a sickness among the livestock. Any of these can mean the difference between a full belly and a winter of starvation. And so he does not face these great and these unpredictable forces alone. He faces them with the help of his gods. Let us climb the small, well-worn path that leads from the village up to the highest point in the local landscape. This is the sacred place, the shrine, the place where the thin and the shimmering veil between the human world and the world of the gods is believed to be at its thinnest. The shrine is not a great stone-built temple. It is a much simpler and a more ancient kind of holy place. It might be a small, circular enclosure, marked out by a low earthen bank and a ditch. It could be a grove of ancient, gnarled and lightning-scarred oak trees whose deep, rustling silence speaks of the presence of a powerful and a very old spirit. Or it might be a single, great and mysterious standing stone, a menhir, that was erected by the people's distant and now almost forgotten ancestors, thousands of years before. This is a place that feels different. The air is stiller, the silence is deeper. It is a place that is set apart from the mundane and the profane world of the village below. We have come here with a farmer and his family. They are here to make an offering, to perform a small and a deeply personal ritual of hope and of appeasement. It is the beginning of the planting season, and they have come to ask the gods for their blessing on the seeds they are about to sow. The farmer carries a small, beautifully made clay bowl, which contains a handful of the very best of his seed corn, the first fruits of his hope for the new year. His wife carries a small clay flask of the oil that has been pressed from the nuts of the forest, a precious and a high-energy commodity. His child carries a simple and a heartfelt offering of the first wild spring flowers. They do not have a priest to guide them. The farmer himself is the priest of his own small family cult. He has learned the rituals, the prayers, the right words to say from his own father in an unbroken oral tradition that stretches back for generations. They approach the heart of the shrine, perhaps a simple, flat-topped stone that serves as an altar. The farmer carefully places his offering of grain on the stone. His wife pours a small libation of the precious oil, its dark, rich liquid staining the grey, lichen-covered surface of the rock. The child lays down their small, colourful bunch of flowers, and then the farmer begins to pray. He does not kneel. He stands, his arms raised to the sky, his face turned to the sun. His prayer is not a silent, internal one. He speaks the words aloud, his voice a low and a rhythmic chant. He is not praying to a single, all-powerful God. His world is a polytheistic one, populated by a host of different gods and spirits, each with their own domain and their own, often unpredictable, personality. He calls upon the great and the powerful God of the sky, the thunderer, to bring the gentle, life-giving spring rains and to hold back the destructive and the terrifying storms of the summer. He calls upon the great and the fertile Earth Mother Goddess to bless the seeds in her womb to make them grow strong and healthy. And he may also call upon the smaller, more local and more intimate spirits of the place, the spirit of the river, the spirit of the forest, the ancestral spirits of his own dead kin who are believed to watch over their living descendants. His prayer is a bargain, a negotiation. He is offering a gift, a small but a significant sacrifice of his own precious resources. And in return he is asking for the gods' favor, for their protection, for a good and a bountiful harvest. It is a relationship that is based on a deep and a mutual sense of reciprocity. When the prayer is finished, the family stands in silence for a few moments in the deep and the listening quiet of the holy place. And then, their duty done, their hopes and their fears placed in the hands of the great and the unseen powers, they turn and they make their way back down the path to the village and to the hard and the practical work of the fields. Let your mind rest in the deep, quiet, and ancient peace of the hilltop shrine. Feel the cool breeze on your skin, see the vast and the endless sky above. It is a place of a deep and a profound connection between the small and the fragile world of humanity and the great and the mysterious world of the cosmos. Part 2. The world of work. Fields of barley. Let us descend from the quiet, sacred space of the hilltop shrine and return to the world of human labor, to the source of the grain that was just offered to the gods. We find ourselves at the edge of the village, in the open, sun-drenched fields that are the community's life-sustaining heart. It is late summer, the time of the harvest, the single most important and labor-intensive event of the entire year. The fields stretch out from the village in a patchwork of small, irregularly shaped plots. They are not the vast, flat and monocultured landscapes of modern agriculture. These are small-scale, intimate fields cleared from the surrounding forest and scrubland by generations of back-breaking labor with stone axes and with fire. The soil is a heavy, clay-like loam, and it is not worked by great iron plows but by simple wooden ards, light plows that are pulled by a pair of slow, patient oxen, and which only scratch a shallow furrow into the earth. The crop that fills these fields is barley. While wheat is also grown, barley is the true staple of the Bronze Age world. It is a hardy, resilient grain, able to thrive in the poor soils and the unpredictable climates of this ancient world. It is the raw material for the two essential pillars of the Bronze Age diet, the thick, nutritious porridge that is eaten at every meal, and the cloudy, low-alcohol and calorie-rich ale that is the primary and the safest beverage for everyone, from the chieftain to the smallest child. And now this precious, life-giving crop is ripe. The fields are a sea of gold, the heavy heads of the barley bowing in the hot, dry, late summer breeze. The air is filled with the dry, dusty, and deeply satisfying smell of ripe grain, and with the low, constant, and almost hypnotic hum of insects. The harvest is a great communal effort. The entire village, men, women, and the older children, are out in the fields working from the first light of dawn until the last fading light of dusk. The work is relentless, and it is performed almost entirely by hand, with simple and often beautiful tools. Let us watch a man at his work. He is bent at the waist, a posture he will maintain for the entire day. In his right hand, he holds his most important harvesting tool, the sickle. It is a beautiful and a deadly object. It consists of a curved wooden handle into which have been set a series of small, sharp, and disposable flint blades which are held in place with a black, sticky bitumen or resin. Some of the wealthier farmers might have a sickle made of the new and the miraculous material of bronze, its crescent-shaped blade a warm golden colour in the sun. With his left hand, the man gathers a small bunch of the tall, dry barley stalks, and then with a single, swift, and practiced C-shaped motion, he draws the sharp, serrated edge of the sickle across the base of the stalks. The sound is a satisfying and a deeply ancient the sound of the harvest itself. He lays the small bunch of cut barley, the sheaf, carefully on the ground behind him, and then he moves on to the next bunch, and the next and the next. His movements are a slow, a rhythmic, and a deeply efficient dance. It is a dance that has been learned over a lifetime of harvests, a dance that is stored in the muscle memory of his body. He does not think about his movements, he simply does them, his body a well-oiled and a deeply human harvesting machine. Behind him, a woman or a child follows, gathering the fallen sheaves and tying them into larger bundles, the stooks, using a twisted rope of the barley straw itself. These stooks are then stood up on their ends in the field, so that the grain can dry completely in the sun and the wind before it is taken to the village for threshing. The work is brutally hard. The sun is a merciless and a constant presence. The dust from the dry stalks gets into the eyes, the throat, the lungs. The sharp cut ends of the barley stubbles scratch the bare legs and the ankles. The constant, repetitive motion of bending and of cutting puts a terrible and a constant strain on the muscles of the back and the legs. By the end of the day, the harvester's body is a single, great, and throbbing ache, and the work is a race against time. The ripe grain cannot be left in the field for long. A sudden and a violent summer thunderstorm can flatten the crop in a matter of minutes, the heavy rain causing the grain to rot on the stalk, and so they work with a quiet, a desperate, and a focused intensity, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for the first dark sign of a coming storm. The harvest is the climax of the year, the culmination of all the labor of the ploughing and the planting. The fate of the entire community for the next year depends on the success of these few, frantic, and back-breaking weeks. A good harvest means a winter of full bellies, of health, and of security. A bad harvest means a winter of hunger, of sickness, and of a deep and a gnawing anxiety. And so they work, their sickles flashing in the sun, their bodies bent in the ancient and the sacred posture of the harvester, their silent and their fervent prayer, the simple and the hopeful shh, shh, shh of the falling grain. The potter's wheel. Let us leave the hot, dusty, and open world of the harvest fields and enter the cool, dark, and deeply creative space of the village workshop. Here, in a small, windowless hut, a different kind of alchemy is taking place. This is the domain of the potter, a specialist, a master craftsman, a man who has learned the ancient and the almost magical art of turning the soft, formless, and humble mud of the riverbank into the hard, beautiful, and essential vessels of daily life. The air in the workshop is cool and damp, and it is filled with the rich, clean, and deeply satisfying smell of wet clay. The room is a cluttered and an ordered chaos. In one corner there is a great pile of the raw clay which has been dug and then painstakingly cleaned of all its impurities, its stones, its roots, its organic matter, by a long and a laborious process of soaking and of sieving. Along the walls, on rough wooden shelves, are the potter's finished and his unfinished works. There are rows and rows of pots in every stage of their creation. There are the soft, grey, and still damp pots that have just been formed. There are the lighter, paler, and bone-dry pots that are waiting for the fire. And there are the finished and the fired pots Their colours are beautiful, and a subtle palette of terracotta reds, of smoky blacks, and of warm, earthy browns. The potter himself sits in the centre of the room, before the tool that is the heart of his craft, and which is one of the great and the transformative inventions of the Bronze Age, the potter's wheel. This is not the fast and the electrically powered wheel of a modern studio. It is a simple and an ingenious human-powered machine. It consists of two wheels, a large, heavy lower flywheel made of stone or of wood, and a smaller upper wheel head on which the clay is worked. The two wheels are connected by a wooden axle. The potter sits on a low stool, and he kicks the lower flywheel with his bare feet, a slow and a rhythmic pushing that sets the entire apparatus in motion. The heavy lower wheel acts as a flywheel, its momentum creating a smooth, a steady, and a surprisingly fast rotation. He takes a lump of the prepared clay, a soft, plastic, and deeply responsive mass, and he throws it with a practiced and a satisfying thwack directly into the center of the moving wheelhead. And then the magic begins. He wets his hands in a bowl of water, and he begins to shape the spinning lump of clay. His movements are a miracle of a quiet, a focused, and a deeply intuitive skill. His hands are his only tools, and they seem to have a mind of their own, a deep and an almost telepathic connection to the clay. With the gentle pressure of his thumbs, he opens up the center of the spinning clay. With the fingers of one hand on the inside and the palm of the other on the outside, he begins to pull up the walls of the pot. The clay seems to grow, to rise, to take on a life of its own under his steady and his confident touch. He is not fighting the clay, he is guiding it, he is persuading it, he is in a silent and a creative partnership with it. In a matter of minutes, the formless lump of mud has been transformed into a beautiful and a perfectly symmetrical vessel. It might be a large, swelling storage jar, a small and a delicate drinking cup, a wide and a shallow bowl. He uses a simple wooden rib to smooth the walls and a piece of wet leather to create a perfect rounded rim. He may then decorate the pot while it is still on the wheel. He might use a sharp, pointed stick to incise a series of fine, parallel lines into the spinning clay. Or he might use a small, carved wooden stamp, a roulette, to create a repeating and an intricate pattern. When he is satisfied, he takes a piece of twisted flax thread, and with a single, swift movement, he cuts the finished pot from the wheelhead. He lifts it carefully and gently, and he places it on a wooden board to begin the long, slow process of drying. The potter is one of the first true specialist craftsmen. His skill is a mystery to the other villagers. He is not a farmer, he is not a herder. He is a man who has dedicated his life to a single and a difficult craft. He may be supported by the community, trading his pots for the grain and the meat and the wool that he needs to survive. He is a creator. He is taking the most common, the most humble, and the most worthless of all materials, the mud of the earth, and he is transforming it through his skill, his knowledge, and his artistic vision into objects that are both profoundly useful and profoundly beautiful. He is a quiet and a humble magician. The bronze smith. Let us move now to another workshop in the village, a place that is the absolute opposite of the cool, damp, and quiet world of the potter. This is a place of intense and of almost terrifying heat, of a deafening and a percussive noise, and of a strange and a powerful new kind of magic. This is the workshop of the bronze smith, the master of the new and the transformative technology that gives this age its name. The workshop is a small, dark, and soot-stained hut, set a little apart from the other dwellings of the village, for the fear of fire is a constant and a very real one. The air inside is thick with the sharp, metallic, and slightly sulphurous smell of hot metal and of the charcoal that fuels the furnace. The smith himself is a figure of immense and of almost supernatural power and prestige. He is a master of a secret and a difficult art. He is not just a craftsman, he is an alchemist, a man who knows the secret rituals of how to transform the dull and the earthy stones of the ore into a new, a shining, and a powerful substance. His knowledge is a closely guarded secret, passed down from a master to an apprentice, and it gives him a status in the community that is second only to that of the chieftain or the priest. Let us watch him at his work. The heart of his workshop is the furnace. It is a small, simple, and incredibly effective structure built of clay and of stone. Inside, a fire of charcoal is burning with an intense and a roaring heat, a heat that is fanned and intensified by a pair of simple and very powerful leather bellows, which are worked by the smith's young and his sweat-soaked apprentice. The sound of the bellows is a deep and a rhythmic whooshing, the sound of the fire's own great lungs. The smith is preparing to make a bronze axe head. He begins with his two precious raw materials. The first is copper, which he may have smelted from a greenish local ore. The second is tin, a much rarer and a more valuable metal, which has likely been brought to the village by a travelling trader from a distant and an almost mythical land, perhaps from the tin mines of Cornwall, in the far and the misty northwest of the known world. He takes a crucible, a small and a very strong clay pot, and he places a carefully measured amount of the copper and the tin into it. The secret of bronze is in the alloy, in the mixing of these two metals in the correct proportion, about 9 parts copper to 1 part tin. This is the knowledge that is the foundation of his art. He places the crucible into the hottest part of the furnace, into the heart of the roaring white-hot charcoal, and then he waits. He watches the crucible with a keen and an experienced eye, judging the state of the metal by the colour of the flames that lick around it. After a long and a tense wait, the moment arrives. He uses a long pair of iron tongs to carefully and to very steadily lift the glowing and the almost incandescent crucible from the furnace. Inside, the solid and the separate metals have been transformed. They have melted and they have fused into a single and a beautiful liquid, a flowing golden orange river of molten bronze. Now he must work quickly. The apprentice has prepared the mould. It is made of 2 carefully carved pieces of soapstone which have been tied together and which have a negative and an axe-shaped space inside. The smith, his face shielded from the intense radiant heat, carefully, and with a surgeon's precision, pours the liquid bronze into a small hole in the top of the mould. There is a brief and a hissing sound as the hot metal meets the cold stone. And then there is another period of a tense and a quiet waiting as the metal cools and solidifies within its stone womb. When the mould is cool enough to handle, the apprentice unties the cords and the 2 halves of the stone are separated. And inside, lying in its stone cradle, is the new and the perfect axe head. It is not yet the shining golden colour we associate with bronze. It is a dull and a dark colour, covered with a rough and a black oxide scale. The final stage of the work begins. The smith breaks off the small excess piece of metal from the pouring channel, the sprue, and then he takes the axe head to his anvil, a great, solid block of stone or of bronze, and with his hammer he begins to work harden the cutting edge of the axe. The sound of the hammer on the new metal, a loud, a clear, and a ringing musical note, a sound that is the very anthem of this new and this powerful age. He will then spend hours grinding and polishing the axe head with sand and with leather, until it has the beautiful and the deeply satisfying, warm, golden sheen of finished bronze. Herding on the edge of the wild. The village is a small and a fragile island of human order in the vast and the untamed wilderness of the Bronze Age landscape. The fields that have been cleared for agriculture are a precious and a limited resource, and so the livestock of the village, the sheep, the goats, and the cattle, cannot be allowed to graze on this valuable arable land. They must be taken to the waste, to the marginal lands at the edge of the human world, to the hillsides, the woodlands, and the marshy pastures that are not suitable for growing crops. And the task of tending to these animals, a job of an immense responsibility, is often entrusted to the youngest and the most vulnerable members of the community, the children. Let us follow a young boy no more than 10 years old as he begins his long and his lonely day's work. He is a shepherd. At dawn he has gathered his family's small flock of sheep, a handful of long-legged and wiry-haired animals, the ancestors of our modern, fluffy breeds. He guides them with a simple and a well-used wooden staff, and with a series of sharp and of whistling calls along the village path, out through the palisade gate, and up into the wild and the open hill country that lies beyond. His companion is a dog, a lean, an intelligent, and a fiercely loyal creature, a working partner whose skills are as essential to the task as the boy's own. The dog moves with a fluid and a silent grace, circling the flock, keeping the straying sheep together, and responding instantly to the boy's quiet and almost imperceptible commands. The boy's world for the day is a world of a profound and a deep solitude. He is far from the noise and the company of the village. His only companions are the sheep, the dog, and the great and the silent presences of the landscape, the sky, the wind, and the ancient rolling hills. His job is a constant and a watchful vigilance. He must lead the flock to the best patches of grazing, to the places where the grass is sweet and the water is clean. He must keep them from wandering too far, from getting lost in a thicket, or from falling into a ravine. But his greatest responsibility is to protect them. The wilderness that is the sheep's pasture is also the hunting ground of their natural predators. The boy must be constantly on the lookout for the shadow of an eagle in the sky, which could swoop down and carry off a young lamb. And he must be on his guard against the most feared of all the wild beasts, the wolf. The wolf is not a creature of myth. It is a real and a constant danger. The boy knows the signs of its presence: a track in the mud, a tuft of hair caught on a thorn bush, the distant and the chilling sound of a howl at dusk. His staff is not just a tool for guiding his flock, it is his only weapon. And his dog is not just a herder, it is a guardian, its sharp ears and its keen nose a constant and an early warning system. If a wolf approaches, the dog will give a low and a warning growl, and will place itself without hesitation between the flock and the danger. The boy and his dog are the flock's only and its very fragile line of defense. The boy's day is a long and a slow one. He has no toys, no books, no distractions. He passes the hours by observing the world around him with a quiet and a deep intensity. He learns the names of the plants, the calls of the birds, the shapes of the clouds. He might practice with his sling, a simple but a deadly weapon made of a strip of leather, which he can use to hurl a small, smooth stone with a surprising and a lethal accuracy. And he learns to be self-reliant. He is the master of his own small and his mobile world. He is responsible for the safety and for the well-being of a significant portion of his family's wealth. His successful return at the end of the day, with his flock intact, is a small and a daily victory. As the sun begins to set, casting long purple shadows across the hills, he begins the journey home. He gathers his flock, and with the help of his dog, he guides them back down the track towards the comforting and the welcoming lights of the village. He has spent his day on the very edge of the wild, in the liminal space between the world of man and the world of the beast. He has faced the solitude and the danger, and he has prevailed. The potter's wheel. Let us leave the hot, dusty, and open world of the harvest fields and enter the cool, dark, and deeply creative space of the village workshop. Here, in a small, windowless hut, a different kind of alchemy is taking place. This is the domain of the potter, a specialist, a master craftsman, a man who has learned the ancient and the almost magical art of turning the soft, formless, and humble mud of the riverbank into the hard, beautiful, and essential vessels of daily life. The air in the workshop is cool and damp, and it is filled with the rich, clean, and deeply satisfying smell of wet clay. The room is a cluttered and an ordered chaos. In one corner there is a great pile of the raw clay which has been dug and then painstakingly cleaned of all its impurities, its stones, its roots, its organic matter, by a long and a laborious process of soaking and of sieving. Along the walls, on rough wooden shelves, are the potter's finished and his unfinished works. There are rows and rows of pots in every stage of their creation. There are the soft, grey, and still damp pots that have just been formed. There are the lighter, paler, and bone-dry pots that are waiting for the fire. And there are the finished and the fired pots. Their colours are beautiful, and a subtle palette of terracotta reds, of smoky blacks, and of warm, earthy browns. The potter himself sits in the centre of the room, before the tool that is the heart of his craft, and which is one of the great and the transformative inventions of the Bronze Age, the potter's wheel. This is not the fast and the electrically powered wheel of a modern studio. It is a simple and an ingenious human-powered machine. It consists of two wheels, a large, heavy lower flywheel made of stone or of wood, and a smaller upper wheel head on which the clay is worked. The two wheels are connected by a wooden axle. The potter sits on a low stool, and he kicks the lower flywheel with his bare feet, a slow and a rhythmic pushing that sets the entire apparatus in motion. The heavy lower wheel acts as a flywheel, its momentum creating a smooth, a steady, and a surprisingly fast rotation. He takes a lump of the prepared clay, a soft, plastic, and deeply responsive mass, and he throws it with a practiced and a satisfying thwack directly into the center of the moving wheel head. And then the magic begins. He wets his hands in a bowl of water, and he begins to shape the spinning lump of clay. His movements are a miracle of a quiet, a focused, and a deeply intuitive skill. His hands are his only tools, and they seem to have a mind of their own, a deep and an almost telepathic connection to the clay. With the gentle pressure of his thumbs, he opens up the center of the spinning clay. With the fingers of one hand on the inside and the palm of the other on the outside, he begins to pull up the walls of the pot. The clay seems to grow, to rise, to take on a life of its own under his steady and his confident touch. He is not fighting the clay, he is guiding it, he is persuading it, he is in a silent and a creative partnership with it. In a matter of minutes, the formless lump of mud has been transformed into a beautiful and a perfectly symmetrical vessel. It might be a large, swelling storage jar, a small and a delicate drinking cup, a wide and a shallow bowl. He uses a simple wooden rib to smooth the walls and a piece of wet leather to create a perfect, rounded rim. He may then decorate the pot while it is still on the wheel. He might use a sharp, pointed stick to incise a series of fine, parallel lines into the spinning clay. Or he might use a small, carved wooden stamp, a roulette, to create a repeating and an intricate pattern. When he is satisfied, he takes a piece of twisted flax thread, and with a single, swift movement, he cuts the finished pot from the wheelhead. He lifts it carefully and gently, and he places it on a wooden board to begin the long, slow process of drying. The potter is one of the first true specialist craftsmen. His skill is a mystery to the other villagers. He is not a farmer, he is not a herder. He is a man who has dedicated his life to a single and a difficult craft. He may be supported by the community, trading his pots for the grain and the meat and the wool that he needs to survive. He is a creator. He is taking the most common, the most humble, and the most worthless of all materials, the mud of the earth, and he is transforming it through his skill, his knowledge, and his artistic vision into objects that are both profoundly useful and profoundly beautiful. He is a quiet and a humble magician. The bronze smith. Let us move now to another workshop in the village, a place that is the absolute opposite of the cool, damp, and quiet world of the potter. This is a place of intense and of almost terrifying heat, of a deafening and a percussive noise, and of a strange and a powerful new kind of magic. This is the workshop of the bronze smith, the master of the new and the transformative technology that gives this age its name. The workshop is a small, dark and soot-stained hut, set a little apart from the other dwellings of the village, for the fear of fire is a constant and a very real one. The air inside is thick with the sharp, metallic, and slightly sulphurous smell of hot metal and of the charcoal that fuels the furnace. The smith himself is a figure of immense and of almost supernatural power and prestige. He is a master of a secret and a difficult art. He is not just a craftsman, he is an alchemist, a man who knows the secret rituals of how to transform the dull and the earthy stones of the ore into a new, a shining, and a powerful substance. His knowledge is a closely guarded secret, passed down from a master to an apprentice, and it gives him a status in the community that is second only to that of the chieftain or the priest. Let us watch him at his work. The heart of his workshop is the furnace. It is a small, simple, and incredibly effective structure built of clay and of stone. Inside, a fire of charcoal is burning with an intense and a roaring heat, a heat that is fanned and intensified by a pair of simple and very powerful leather bellows, which are worked by the smith's young and his sweat-soaked apprentice. The sound of the bellows is a deep and a rhythmic whooshing, the sound of the fire's own great lungs. The smith is preparing to make a bronze axe head. He begins with his two precious raw materials. The first is copper, which he may have smelted from a greenish local ore. The second is tin, a much rarer and a more valuable metal, which has likely been brought to the village by a travelling trader from a distant and an almost mythical land, perhaps from the tin mines of Cornwall, in the far and the misty northwest of the known world. He takes a crucible, a small and a very strong clay pot, and he places a carefully measured amount of the copper and the tin into it. The secret of bronze is in the alloy, in the mixing of these two metals in the correct proportion, about 9 parts copper to 1 part tin. This is the knowledge that is the foundation of his art. He places the crucible into the hottest part of the furnace, into the heart of the roaring white-hot charcoal, and then he waits. He watches the crucible with a keen and an experienced eye, judging the state of the metal by the colour of the flames that lick around it. After a long and a tense wait, the moment arrives. He uses a long pair of iron tongs to carefully and to very steadily lift the glowing and the almost incandescent crucible from the furnace. Inside the solid and the separate metals have been transformed. They have melted and they have fused into a single and a beautiful liquid, a flowing golden orange river of molten bronze. Now he must work quickly. The apprentice has prepared the mould. It is made of 2 carefully carved pieces of soapstone which have been tied together and which have a negative and an axe-shaped space inside. The smith, his face shielded from the intense radiant heat, carefully and with a surgeon's precision pours the liquid bronze into a small hole in the top of the mould. There is a brief and a hissing sound as the hot metal meets the cold stone. And then there is another period of a tense and a quiet waiting as the metal cools and solidifies within its stone womb. When the mould is cool enough to handle, the apprentice unties the cords and the 2 halves of the stone are separated. And inside, lying in its stone cradle, is the new and the perfect axe head. It is not yet the shining golden colour we associate with bronze. It is a dull and a dark colour, covered with a rough and a black oxide scale. The final stage of the work begins. The smith breaks off the small excess piece of metal from the pouring channel, the sprue. And then he takes the axe head to his anvil, a great, solid block of stone or of bronze, and with his hammer he begins to work harden the cutting edge of the axe, the sound of the hammer on the new metal, a loud, a clear, and a ringing musical note, a sound that is the very anthem of this new and this powerful age. He will then spend hours grinding and polishing the axe head with sand and with leather, until it has the beautiful and the deeply satisfying, warm, golden sheen of finished bronze. Herding on the edge of the wild. The village is a small and a fragile island of human order in the vast and the untamed wilderness of the Bronze Age landscape. The fields that have been cleared for agriculture are a precious and a limited resource, and so the livestock of the village, the sheep, the goats, and the cattle, cannot be allowed to graze on this valuable arable land. They must be taken to the waste, to the marginal lands at the edge of the human world, to the hillsides, the woodlands, and the marshy pastures that are not suitable for growing crops. And the task of tending to these animals, a job of an immense responsibility, is often entrusted to the youngest and the most vulnerable members of the community, the children. Let us follow a young boy no more than 10 years old as he begins his long and his lonely day's work. He is a shepherd. At dawn he has gathered his family's small flock of sheep, a handful of long-legged and wiry-haired animals, the ancestors of our modern fluffy breeds. He guides them with a simple and a well-used wooden staff, and with a series of sharp and of whistling calls along the village path, out through the palisade gate, and up into the wild and the open hill country that lies beyond. His companion is a dog, a lean, an intelligent, and a fiercely loyal creature, a working partner whose skills are as essential to the task as the boy's own. The dog moves with a fluid and a silent grace, circling the flock, keeping the straying sheep together, and responding instantly to the boy's quiet and almost imperceptible commands. The boy's world for the day is a world of a profound and a deep solitude. He is far from the noise and the company of the village. His only companions are the sheep, the dog, and the great and the silent presences of the landscape, the sky, the wind, and the ancient rolling hills. His job is a constant and a watchful vigilance. He must lead the flock to the best patches of grazing, to the places where the grass is sweet and the water is clean. He must keep them from wandering too far, from getting lost in a thicket, or from falling into a ravine. But his greatest responsibility is to protect them. The wilderness that is the sheep's pasture is also the hunting ground of their natural predators. The boy must be constantly on the lookout for the shadow of an eagle in the sky, which could swoop down and carry off a young lamb. And he must be on his guard against the most feared of all the wild beasts, the wolf. The wolf is not a creature of myth. It is a real and a constant danger. The boy knows the signs of its presence: a track in the mud, a tuft of hair caught on a thorn bush, the distant and the chilling sound of a howl at dusk. His staff is not just a tool for guiding his flock, it is his only weapon. And his dog is not just a herder, it is a guardian, its sharp ears and its keen nose a constant and an early warning system. If a wolf approaches, the dog will give a low and a warning growl, and will place itself without hesitation between the flock and the danger. The boy and his dog are the flock's only and its very fragile line of defense. The boy's day is a long and a slow one. He has no toys, no books, no distractions. He passes the hours by observing the world around him with a quiet and a deep intensity. He learns the names of the plants, the calls of the birds, the shapes of the clouds. He might practice with his sling, a simple but a deadly weapon made of a strip of leather which he can use to hurl a small, smooth stone with a surprising and a lethal accuracy. And he learns to be self-reliant. He is the master of his own small and his mobile world. He is responsible for the safety and for the well-being of a significant portion of his family's wealth. His successful return at the end of the day, with his flock intact, is a small and a daily victory. As the sun begins to set, casting long purple shadows across the hills, he begins the journey home. He gathers his flock, and with the help of his dog, he guides them back down the track towards the comforting and the welcoming lights of the village. He has spent his day on the very edge of the wild, in the liminal space between the world of man and the world of the beast. He has faced the solitude and the danger, and he has prevailed. The loom's song. Let us return one last time to the interior of the Bronze Age hut. While the men are in the fields or at the forge, a different and an equally vital kind of work is taking place within the home. This is the world of textile production, a craft that is almost entirely in the hands of women. And the soundtrack to this world is the steady and the rhythmic song of the loom. In a corner of the hut, a woman is sitting or is standing before a large and an impressive wooden structure. This is the warp-weighted loom, an ancient and an ingenious piece of technology that has been used to create cloth for thousands of years. It is a simple and a vertical frame with an upper beam from which hang a series of long and parallel threads. These are the warp threads. At the bottom of each of these threads is a small and a heavy weight made of baked clay or of stone, which keeps the threads taut and orderly. The woman is a weaver, and she is engaged in a process that is both physically demanding and intensely skillful. She holds in her hand a shuttle, a simple, boat-shaped piece of wood, around which has been wound a long, continuous thread. This is the weft thread. Her movements are a blur of a practiced and a beautiful efficiency. She takes a long, flat and sword-like piece of wood, the beater, and she uses it to separate a set of the warp threads from the others, creating a small and a temporary gap, the shed. Through this shed she passes the shuttle from one side of the loom to the other, laying down a single horizontal line of the weft thread. Then she takes the beater and she brings it down hard against the new line of the weft, packing it tightly against the line that came before it. The sound is a loud, a solid, and a deeply satisfying thwack. This is the loom's song, a steady and a percussive beat that is the rhythm of creation. She then changes the shed, raising a different set of the warp threads, and she passes the shuttle back in the opposite direction. And then another loud thwack of the beater, and so it goes on and on for hours, for days, the passing of the shuttle, the beating of the weft. It is a slow and a painstaking process. A few precious inches of new cloth are the result of a long and a hard day's work. The thread she is using is the product of another, equally laborious process. It is the wool from the family's own sheep or the flax from their own fields. The raw fibers have been cleaned and then they have been spun into a continuous thread, a task that is performed by the women and the girls of the household using a simple and a miraculous tool, the drop spindle. They will spin constantly in every spare moment of their day, as they walk, as they watch the children, as they sit and talk. The cloth that is being created on the loom is a work of art, as well as a necessity. The woman may be weaving in threads of different colours which have been dyed with the pigments from local plants, the yellow of the weld, the blue of the woad, the red of the madder root, to create intricate and beautiful geometric patterns. The patterns are not just decorative, they are a form of cultural expression, a signature of a particular family or a tribe. This cloth is the family's primary protection against the cold. It will be made into the simple and the functional tunics and the cloaks that they wear. A good and a thick woolen cloak is a precious and a life-sustaining possession. And the cloth is also a form of wealth. A surplus of cloth can be traded at the market for the things the family cannot produce itself, for pottery, for salt, for a new and a beautiful bronze axe head. In this world, the skill of the weaver is as vital to the family's economic well-being as the skill of the farmer. Let your mind be lulled by the steady and the hypnotic rhythm of the loom. Hear the soft and the swishing sound of the shuttle and the loud and the solid thwack of the beater. It is the sound of order being created from chaos, of a beautiful and a useful fabric being born from a tangle of simple threads. It is the quiet and the powerful song of civilization itself. Part 3. Power and Exchange. The chieftain's house in the humble and the largely egalitarian landscape of the Bronze Age village, one building stands apart. It is not a place of worship, nor is it a communal workshop. It is a dwelling, a house, but it is a house that is larger, that is more solidly built, and that is more strategically placed than any of the simple reed huts of the common villagers. This is the house of the chieftain, the great man of the village, and it is a powerful and a physical statement of a new and a growing social complexity. Let us approach this special building. It is not tucked away among the other huts. It is often situated in the most prominent and the most defensible position in the settlement, perhaps at the very centre, or on a slight, natural rise of land that overlooks the rest of the village. It is a house that is designed to be seen, to be looked up to. The house itself is a more substantial and a more permanent structure than the common dwellings. It is not a small circular hut. It is a great, long and rectangular hall. Its walls are not made of simple wattle and daub. They are constructed of thick and of heavy timber posts, the spaces between them filled with a more sophisticated and a more durable form of plaster, or even with a crude and a sun-dried mud brick. The roof is still made of a thick thatch, but it is a higher and a more steeply pitched roof, a clear and a visible sign of the building's superior status. The entire complex is likely surrounded by its own private, defensive enclosure, a smaller and a more formidable palisade within the larger palisade of the village. This is a clear and a physical separation of the chieftain's world from the world of the common people. We enter the great hall. The space inside is vast, and it is impressive compared to the cramped and the smoky interiors of the normal huts. The air is still smoky, but the high, vaulted roof gives the smoke more room to circulate, making the atmosphere a little clearer, a little more breathable. The central hearth is larger, and it is more formally constructed, perhaps with a curb of carefully laid stones. The hall is a multi-purpose space. It is the chieftain's private home where he and his immediate family live and sleep. But it is also a public space, the political and the social and the military center of the entire community. It is here that the chieftain holds his court, that he meets with the elders of the village, that he dispenses a simple and a patriarchal form of justice, settling disputes between his people. It is also a place of feasting and of a deliberate and a strategic display of wealth. The chieftain's power is not just based on his military prowess, it is based on his ability to be generous, to give gifts, to provide for his followers. On special occasions, he will host a great feast in this hall, and he will slaughter one of his precious cattle to feed the entire community. To be a great leader in this world is to be a great giver. The objects in this hall are different from those in the other huts. The pottery is finer, more skillfully made, and more elaborately decorated. There are vessels of a new and a luxurious material, bronze. A great bronze cauldron might be hanging over the fire, a symbol of the chieftain's ability to provide a great feast. Drinking vessels of wood, or even of precious and of imported amber, are on display. And on the walls there are the symbols of his power, the weapons. There are rows of bronze-tipped spears, their shafts polished and smooth. There are the heavy and the leaf-shaped bronze swords, the most advanced and the most terrifying military technology of the age. And there are the great, round and beautifully decorated bronze shields, their surfaces covered in intricate and in swirling geometric patterns, which are as much a symbol of his status as they are a tool of war. The chieftain's house is a sign that the simple and the kin-based society of the Neolithic period is beginning to break down and to be replaced by a more hierarchical and a more stratified social order. The chieftain is not a king, not an absolute ruler. His power is still based on his personal charisma, on his success in war, and on his ability to maintain the support of his key followers, his band of elite warriors. But his great house and the precious bronze objects within it are a clear and a visible sign that a gap is opening up between the ruler and the ruled, a gap that will only widen in the centuries to come. Let your mind rest in the great, smoky, and deeply impressive space of the chieftain's hall. See the firelight glinting on the polished bronze of the shields and the spear tips. Hear the low and the respectful murmur of the elders as they gather for a council. This is a place of a new and a concentrated power, the seed from which the great kingdoms and the empires of the future will eventually grow. The trader's arrival. The village is a small and a largely self-sufficient world. The food, the cloth, the pottery, the simple wooden tools, all are produced locally by the hands of the villagers themselves. But there are some things, some precious and some essential materials, that the village cannot produce. And for these it must rely on the services of a rare, an exciting, and a deeply mysterious figure. This is the traveling trader, and his arrival is a major and a transformative event in the quiet and the repetitive life of the community. Let us watch him as he arrives. He is not a local man. He is a stranger, a man from a distant land, a man who speaks with a strange accent and who wears strange clothes. He does not arrive alone. He is accompanied by a small and a well-armed group of guards, for the roads he travels are dangerous, and his cargo is immensely valuable. His means of transport is not a great wheeled wagon. The roads of the Bronze Age are little more than rough and often impassable tracks. He travels with a train of pack animals, usually a string of sturdy and of sure-footed donkeys, and on the backs of these donkeys is the wealth of the wider world. The trader is a link, a single and a vital human thread in a vast and a fragile network of long-distance exchange that crisscrosses the continent. He has travelled for weeks, for months, through dense forests, over high mountain passes and across wide and unbridged rivers. He is a man of immense courage, of great practical skill, and of a deep and an intuitive knowledge of geography. The entire village turns out to greet him. His arrival is a source of great excitement and of great opportunity. He is led to the open space before the chieftain's house, and he begins to unload his precious cargo. What does he carry? He carries the raw materials of the Bronze Age itself. On the back of one donkey are a series of heavy and loaf-shaped ingots of a dull and a silvery grey metal. This is tin, the rare and the essential ingredient that must be mixed with the more common, local copper to create bronze. The sources of tin are few and they are far away, and the trader who can bring it to the village is a man of immense importance. He also carries finished and luxury goods. He might have a sword, a beautiful and a deadly leaf-shaped blade that was made in a famous and a far-distant workshop, its craftsmanship far superior to that of the local smith. He might have a collection of beautiful and of exotic jewellery, necklaces of amber, the fossilized and the honey-coloured resin that has been brought all the way from the distant and the cold shores of the Baltic Sea, or beads of a deep and a beautiful blue stone lapis lazuli that has made an almost unimaginable journey from the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. He also brings more practical but equally vital commodities. He may have large and solid cakes of salt, a precious and an essential mineral for the preserving of meat, which is not available in every region. The trader is not just a merchant, he is a bringer of news and of new ideas. He tells the chieftain stories of the other lands he has visited, of the different customs, of the different gods, of the great and the powerful chieftains he has met on his journey. He is the village's internet, its only and its very slow and its very unreliable source of information about the wider world. He might bring with him a new technology, a new style of pottery, a new idea about how to build a house or how to worship a god. The process of exchange is a long and a complex one. There is no money. The trader will barter his precious and his exotic goods for the surplus produce of the village. He will trade his tin and his amber and his salt for the things that the village has in abundance, for sacks of grain, for rolls of woolen cloth, for the hides of their cattle, and perhaps for a few strong and healthy young slaves who have been captured in a recent raid on a neighbouring village. The trader's arrival is a profound and a deeply significant event. It is the moment when the small and the isolated world of the village is connected to the great and the growing network of the Bronze Age world. He is a weaver of connections, a man who is slowly and painstakingly stitching the scattered and the isolated communities of the human world into a single and a more complex and a more interconnected whole. The market's noise. The arrival of the trader, or the natural accumulation of a local surplus, gives rise to a new and a revolutionary social institution. This is the market, a designated time and a designated place where people from the village and from the surrounding, smaller and more isolated farmsteads can gather to exchange their goods, their labour and their news. The market is the loud, the chaotic, and the vibrant beating heart of the emerging Bronze Age economy. Let us visit a market day. It is held in a large, open, and centrally located space in the village, or perhaps in a neutral and a defensible territory between several different villages. The air is filled with a sound that is rare in the quiet and the agrarian world of the Bronze Age, the loud and the sustained hum of a large and an excited crowd. The market is not a collection of neat and of orderly stalls. It is a chaotic and a sprawling and an organic affair. People simply lay out their goods on a woven mat or a piece of hide on the ground. The scene is a rich and a colourful tapestry of the products of a dozen different small and specialised economies. Here, a farmer from an outlying homestead has brought a small surplus of his barley harvest, carried in a rough and a heavy leather sack. He is hoping to trade it for a new and a sharp bronze axe head. Next to him, a fisherman from a nearby river has a basket of fresh and of silver-skinned fish, which he has kept cool with a layer of wet reeds. He is selling them quickly before the heat of the day can spoil them. A woman from a family of skilled weavers has a beautiful and a brightly coloured woolen cloak for sale. Its intricate geometric patterns a testament to her long and her patient hours at the loom. A hunter from the forest has brought the skins of a deer and a wild boar and a string of dried and of smoked mushrooms. The market is a place of a direct and a very personal commerce. The transactions are not mediated by the cold and the abstract logic of money. They are conducted through the ancient and the very human art of the bargain. The farmer and the blacksmith stand and they argue and they haggle for a long time over the value of the barley versus the value of the axe head. The negotiation is a piece of theatre, a test of wills, a complex and a social dance. The two men will start with ridiculously high and low offers, and then slowly, and with a great deal of sighing and of head shaking, they will move towards a price that both of them can grudgingly accept. A deal is finally struck, not with the signing of a contract, but with a simple and a binding handshake. The noise of the market is a rich and a multi-layered symphony. It is the sound of these dozens of individual bargains being shouted across the blankets. It is the sound of the livestock that has been brought for sale, the bleating of the sheep, the squealing of the pigs. It is the sound of the craftsmen who have set up their temporary workshops at the edge of the market, the loud and the ringing clang of the blacksmith's hammer on his anvil, the rhythmic and the scraping sound of a man making a new wooden handle for a hoe. But the market is more than just a place of commerce. It is the most important and the most exciting social event in the life of the community. It is the place where young people from different and from isolated farmsteads can meet and can eye each other with a shy and a hopeful interest. It is the place where old friends can catch up on the news, where new alliances can be forged, and where old and simmering disputes can sometimes boil over into a loud and a public argument. The chieftain and his elite and his bronze-armed warriors are also here. They are not here to trade. They are here to be seen, to display their power, and to keep the peace. Their presence is a guarantee of the market peace, a sacred and a temporary truce in which all old feuds are to be set aside. They may also be here to collect a tax, a small portion of the goods that are being traded, as a payment for their protection. The market is a fragile and a beautiful and a profoundly important institution. It is a sign of a world that is becoming more specialized, more interconnected, and more peaceful, at least for a day. It is the seed of the great and the bustling towns and the cities of the future. The warrior's oath, the Bronze Age, is an era of a great and of a creative energy. but it is also an age of a new and a terrible and a highly organized violence. The development of bronze weapons and the accumulation of a surplus of wealth leads to a world of increasing warfare, of raids, and of conquest. And at the heart of this new and this violent world is the figure of the warrior and the sacred and the binding ritual of his oath of loyalty. Let us stand in the open space before the chieftain's great hall. The sun is high, and it glints on the polished and the golden surfaces of the bronze weapons that are held by the men who are assembled here. This is the chieftain's personal warband, his comitatus, the elite and the professional fighting force that is the foundation of his power. They are young men in the prime of their physical strength. They are not simple farmers who have been called from the fields to defend their homes. They are specialist warriors. Their only job is to fight. They are supported by the chieftain who gives them food and shelter and, most importantly, their magnificent and their very expensive bronze weapons. And today a new young warrior is to be initiated into this exclusive and this deadly brotherhood. He stands before the chieftain, his head bowed. He is armed not with the great and the leaf-shaped sword of a proven warrior, but with a simple and a functional spear. The ceremony is a simple, a public, and a deeply solemn one. The chieftain stands before the assembled people of the village, and he presents the young man to them. He speaks of the young man's lineage, of the brave deeds of his father, of the strength and the courage that the young man himself has shown. And then the chieftain gives the young man the tools of his new trade. He presents him with a shield, a great round and wooden shield, perhaps covered with a tuft and a bull's hide, and with a beautiful and a gleaming bronze boss at its center. And then he gives him the most precious and the most significant gift of all. He gives him a sword. The sword is the ultimate and the iconic weapon of the Bronze Age. It is an object of an immense and of a practical and of a symbolic power. It is incredibly expensive to produce, and it is a sign of a high and of an elite status. To be given a sword by the chieftain is to be accepted into the warrior class. The young man takes the sword, and then he makes his oath. He raises his spear or his sword to the sky, and he swears a great and a binding oath of loyalty to the chieftain. He swears to follow him in war, to defend him with his own life, to never retreat from a battle, and to be his loyal and his faithful companion in both victory and in defeat. This oath is the glue that holds the warband and this entire new and this warrior-based society together. It is a deeply personal and a reciprocal bond. The warrior owes the chieftain his absolute and his unquestioning loyalty, and the chieftain, in return, owes the warrior his protection, his generosity, and his leadership. The chieftain is the ring-giver, the man who rewards his followers with the spoils of war, with the rings of gold and of bronze that are the measure of a man's worth. The war band is a brotherhood. The men fight together, they eat together, they live together in the chieftain's great hall. The bond between them is a powerful and an almost sacred one. To betray one's comrades, to show cowardice in battle, is the greatest and the most unforgivable of all shames. This new and this warrior ethos will come to dominate the societies of the Bronze Age and of the Iron Age that will follow. It is a world that glorifies military courage, that celebrates the hero who dies in battle, and that sees the world as a place of a constant and of a violent struggle for honor, for wealth, and for power. When the oath is sworn, the other warriors of the warband will beat their spears on their shields, a loud, a rhythmic, and a deeply intimidating sound, a sound of an approval and of a welcome. The young man has been accepted. He is now one of them. He has a place and a purpose in this new and this hard and this violent world the scribe's marks. In the midst of this world of the farmer, the potter, the smith, and the warrior, another, and a much quieter and a much stranger, revolution is taking place. It is a revolution of the mind, a transformation in the way that human beings store and transmit and think about information. This is the dawn of writing. Let us travel south and east to the great and the sun-baked river valleys of Mesopotamia or of Egypt. Here, in the heart of the world's first great urban civilizations, we find a new and a powerful kind of specialist. He is not a craftsman who works with his hands to shape the physical world. He is a craftsman who works with symbols to shape the world of ideas. This is the scribe. We find him in a small and a sun-drenched courtyard in the great and the labyrinthine temple, or the palace complex. He is sitting cross-legged on a reed mat. He is not a man of a great and a physical strength. His hands are not calloused from the plough or the hammer. They are smooth, they are nimble, and they are stained with ink. Before him is his primary tool, a simple and a wet and a beautifully smooth tablet of river clay, and in his hand he holds his pen, which is not a pen at all in our sense. It is a stylus, a piece of reed that has been cut to a sharp and a triangular point. And with this simple tool, he is performing a miracle. He is making language visible. He is pressing the end of the stylus into the soft clay, creating small and wedge-shaped marks. This is the script we call cuneiform. Each combination of these wedge-shaped marks represents a syllable or a word. He is not drawing pictures, he is writing sounds. His work is slow and it is painstaking, and it requires an immense and a learned skill. The knowledge of how to read and to write this complex script is a secret and a very powerful form of knowledge. It is learned over many years of a hard and a disciplined education in a special scribal school. The scribe is a member of a tiny and an elite and a highly privileged class. What is he writing? He is not at first writing great works of literature or of poetry or of history. The first and the most important function of writing is a deeply and a surprisingly mundane one. It is an accounting tool. The great temple or the palace is a huge and a complex economic institution. It owns vast amounts of land and of livestock. It employs thousands of people, and it needs to keep records. The scribe is the bookkeeper of the Bronze Age. The clay tablet he is working on is a receipt. It is a record of how many sacks of barley have been brought in from the fields, and how many have been paid out as wages to the weavers in the temple workshop. This is a revolution. Before writing, all of this information had to be stored in the fallible and the limited and the mortal memory of a single human being. Now it can be recorded permanently and accurately on a piece of baked clay. A clay tablet, once it has been dried in the sun or baked in a kiln, is an incredibly durable object. We can still read these ancient and these humble administrative records thousands of years after the scribe who wrote them has turned to dust. But from these humble and these practical beginnings, the power of writing begins to grow and to transform the world. A king can now send his commands, his laws, to the far and the distant corners of his kingdom in a form that cannot be misremembered or disputed. A treaty between two great and rival powers can be written down, and it can be preserved. And slowly the scribes begin to use their powerful and their new tool for other things. They begin to write down the old and the oral stories of their people, the great and the epic, tales of the gods and of the heroes. They begin to write down the sacred and the liturgical hymns of the temple. They begin to write down their knowledge of the world, their observations of the stars, their medical recipes, their mathematical formulas. The scribe's simple and his wedge-shaped marks are a technology that will change the world more profoundly than even the discovery of bronze, and they are the beginning of history, of literature, of science, of law. They are the first and the most important step in the long and the slow and the ongoing human project of creating a world that is made not just of mud and of bronze, but of memory and of ideas. Part 4. Hunger, Fear and Belief. The Failed Harvest. The rhythm of Bronze Age. Life is governed by the great and the hopeful cycle of planting and of harvesting. But this cycle is a fragile one, and when it breaks, the consequences are swift, and they are catastrophic. Let us visit our village in a year when the gods have not been kind, when the prayers at the hilltop shrine have gone unanswered. This is a year of the failed harvest, a year of hunger. The signs of the disaster have been present all summer. The spring rains, which should have been gentle and life-giving, never came. The sun, which should have been a source of a gentle and a ripening warmth, became a merciless and a brazen enemy, baking the heavy clay soil of the fields into a cracked and a concrete-hard wasteland. The barley, which should have grown tall and green and strong, was stunted. The stalks were thin and pale and yellow. And the heads of the grain, which should have been heavy and full and pregnant with the promise of a bountiful harvest, were small and light and withered. And now, in the late summer, the fields that should have been a sea of waving golden grain are a sparse and a pathetic and a deeply depressing landscape of dry and of brittle and of almost empty stalks. The harvest, which should have been a time of a great and of a communal and of a joyful labour, is a quiet, a swift, and a deeply sorrowful affair. The sickles flash, but they gather only a fraction of the grain that is needed. The consequences of this failure are felt almost immediately. The chieftain and his warriors and the priests of the shrine will take their share first. They are the powerful, and they will not go hungry. What is left for the common farmers is a meagre and a terrifyingly small amount of grain. The family's storage pot, which in a good year would be filled to the brim, a symbol of a winter's security, is now only a quarter full, and the grain that is in it is of a poor and a shriveled quality. The woman of the house looks at this small and this precious store of food, and her heart is filled with a cold and a gnawing dread. She knows with a simple and a brutal and a mathematical certainty that it will not be enough to feed her family through the long and the cold and the hungry months of the coming winter. The time of hunger, the hungry gap, which in a normal year is a difficult period in the late winter, begins much earlier this year. By the first cold winds of autumn, the family is already rationing its food. The daily meal of porridge becomes thinner and more watery. The small and the flat and the unleavened loaves of bread are made smaller, and they are made with a flour that has been bulked out with the addition of less nourishing and more desperate ingredients: the ground and the bitter husks of the barley, the dried and the powdered roots of the forest plants, and even the bark from the trees. The hunger is a constant and a dull and a wearying ache in the belly. It is a physical sensation, but it is also a profound and a psychological one. The world becomes a smaller and a greyer place. There is no energy for laughter, for games, for the simple and the unnecessary joys of life. All of the body's and the mind's resources are focused on a single and an obsessive goal, the finding and the consuming of the next small and the unsatisfying mouthful of food. The children, whose small bodies have no reserves of fat, are the first to suffer. They become listless. Their bellies swell with the kwashiorkor of malnutrition. Their cries become thin and weak and reedy. The old and the sick, whose bodies are already frail, are the next. The failed harvest is a catastrophe that ripples through the entire community. The bonds of kinship and of neighborliness, which seem so strong in a time of plenty, are now tested to their breaking point. Food is hoarded. Suspicion and resentment grow like a bitter weed. A family that is seen to be eating better than its neighbors becomes an object of a dangerous and a violent envy. The people turn to their gods, but their prayers are no longer the hopeful and the bargaining prayers of the planting season. They are the desperate and the angry and the fearful prayers of a people who feel that they have been abandoned. Why have the gods done this to them? Have they broken a taboo? Have they failed to perform a ritual correctly? Is the chieftain no longer in favor with the gods? The social and the political and the religious fabric of the community begins to unravel. The failed harvest is the great and the recurring nightmare of the Bronze Age world. It is a stark and a brutal reminder of the profound and the almost absolute fragility of this early and this agricultural civilization. The new and the powerful technology of bronze can create a beautiful sword, but it cannot make the rain fall, and it cannot make the grain grow. The stranger at the gate. The village is a small, an insular, and a deeply conservative world. It is a community that is bound together by the powerful and the comforting ties of kinship, of custom, and of a shared and a familiar landscape. And for this reason, the arrival of a stranger, a person from the outside, is a rare, an exciting, and a deeply unsettling event. Let us stand at the gate in the village palisade as such a figure approaches. He is walking alone, and he is a man who is clearly not from this place. His clothes are different, his hair is cut in a different style, and he carries himself with an air of a weary and a worldly experience that sets him apart from the local farmers. His arrival is not unnoticed. A child who was playing near the gate sees him first and runs, shouting, back into the village. The men who are working nearby stop what they are doing, and they pick up their tools, their axes, and their spears. Their faces a mixture of a curiosity and a deep and an instinctive suspicion. The stranger is a potential source of news, of trade, of new ideas, but he is also a potential threat. Is he a scout for a raiding party? Is he a refugee fleeing from a war or a famine who will be a drain on the village's own meager resources? Is he an exile, a man who has been cast out from his own community for a terrible crime? The stranger stops at the gate. He does not try to enter. He waits patiently to be approached. The chieftain and a small and a well-armed group of his warriors comes out to meet him. The first and the most important ritual of the encounter is the asking of questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your lineage? What is your business here? The stranger must answer these questions truthfully and fully. His identity is not his own private affair. It is a matter of his ancestry, of his tribe, of the complex and the unwritten map of the social landscape of the wider world. If his answers are satisfactory, if he is a known and a friendly trader, or a messenger from an allied chieftain, he will be welcomed. He will be offered the hospitality of the village, a place by the fire in the chieftain's hall, a bowl of stew, a cup of ale. The laws of hospitality are a sacred and a binding duty in this world. To harm a guest once you have accepted him into your home is a terrible and a shameful crime. And then the stranger will be expected to give his own precious and his invaluable gift in return. He will be expected to give his news. He sits by the fire, the center of attention, and he tells the assembled people of the village of the world that lies beyond their own familiar horizons. He tells of the great and the powerful chieftain who is rising in the next valley, of the new and the formidable hill fort that is being built. He tells of the war that has broken out between two great and distant tribes, a war that may one day spill over into their own peaceful land. He tells of the strange and the new and the powerful gods that are being worshipped in the lands he has passed through. He tells of the terrible and the devastating plague that has struck the people of the coast. He is a living and a breathing newspaper, a single and a vital thread of connection in a world that is large and that is dangerous and that is largely unknown. But if the stranger is not a friend, if he is an exile or a man with no clear and no respectable lineage, his fate is a much more uncertain one. He may be turned away, sent back out into the wilderness from which he came, or if the village is in need of an extra and an able-bodied man, and if he is willing to swear an oath of loyalty to the chieftain, he may be accepted into the community. But he will always be an outsider, a man with a past that is not their past, a man who is not, and who will never truly be, one of them. The stranger at the gate is a powerful and a deeply unsettling figure. He is a crack in the smooth and the seamless surface of the village's world. He is a reminder that their own and their familiar and their sacred ways are not the only ways. He is a messenger from a larger and a more complex and a more dangerous and a more exciting world. The healer's herbs. In the small and the often unhealthy world of the Bronze Age village, sickness is a constant and a terrifying presence. A simple and an infected cut, a bout of dysentery, a fever that sweeps through the community in the damp and the cold of winter. These are not minor ailments, they are life-threatening crises. And in a world with no scientific and no medical understanding, the response to sickness is a complex and a desperate and a deeply spiritual mixture of a practical herbal knowledge, of a magical ritual, and of a fervent and a pleading prayer. Let us enter a hut where a child is sick. The child is lying on a rush mat near the fire, their body hot with a fever, their breathing shallow and their eyes clouded with a listless and a painful delirium. The family is in a state of a quiet and a desperate panic. They have made their offerings at the hilltop shrine. They have prayed to the ancestral spirits. And now they have called for the one person in the village who is believed to have a special and a powerful knowledge of the secret and the healing arts. This is the healer. The healer is often an old woman, a wise woman, a figure who is both respected and a little feared by the community. Her knowledge is not the knowledge of the smith or the potter. It is a more ancient and a more mysterious and a more intuitive kind of knowledge, a deep and a practical understanding of the hidden and the powerful properties of the plants of the forest and of the field. She arrives, her face a calm and a reassuring mask. She carries with her a leather pouch or a woven basket, which is her pharmacy. Inside are the tools of her trade, small and dried and intensely aromatic, bundles of herbs, strange and gnarled and twisted roots, small and clay, pots of a greasy and a strong-smelling salve. She kneels beside the sick child. She does not at first do anything. She simply watches and she listens. She listens to the sound of the child's breathing. She looks at the color of the child's skin, at the clarity of their eyes. She may place a cool and a dry and a very sensitive hand on the child's forehead to gauge the heat of the fever, and she listens to the family. She asks them questions. What has the child eaten? Where have they been playing? Has the family perhaps offended a neighbor or broken a sacred and a local taboo? For the healer, sickness is not just a physical phenomenon. It is a sign of a deeper and a spiritual imbalance, a disharmony between the person, the community, and the world of the spirits. And then she begins her treatment. Her treatment is a holistic one, a ritual that is designed to heal the spirit as well as the body. She may prepare a bitter and a strong-smelling tea from the leaves of the willow tree, which we now know contains a natural form of aspirin to reduce the fever. She may make a soothing poultice of crushed comfrey leaves, the knitbone, to place on a wound or a swelling. But the herbs themselves are only a part of the cure. The real power, it is believed, lies in the way that they are administered. The healer will chant as she prepares the medicine, her voice a low and a hypnotic and a rhythmic hum. The words of the chant are ancient and they are powerful, and they are often a mixture of a plea to a benevolent and a healing God and a command to the malevolent and the sickness-causing spirit to leave the child's body. She might also perform a small and a symbolic act of a magical transference. She might take a thread from the child's tunic, and she might tie it to the branch of a living and a healthy tree, the idea being that the sickness will flow from the child through the thread and into the tree which is strong enough to absorb it. The healer's work is a powerful and a deeply necessary piece of a psychological and of a communal theatre. In a world of a profound and of a terrifying medical helplessness, she provides a sense of agency, a sense of hope. She provides a narrative, an explanation for the sickness. She provides a ritual, an action to be taken. Her calm and her confident and her knowledgeable presence is, itself, a powerful and a healing medicine for the terrified family. Her cures do not always work. The children of the Bronze Age die when they die often, but sometimes they do work. The child's fever breaks, their breathing becomes easier, the life and the light returns to their eyes. And in these moments, the healer is seen for what she is, a vital and a powerful and a deeply sacred link between the fragile and the human world and the great and the mysterious and the healing powers of the natural and the spiritual world. The burial mound. Death in the Bronze Age is not a private and a hidden and a sanitized affair. It is a constant and a familiar and a deeply communal event. And the final and the most important duty that the living owe to the dead is to provide them with a proper and a powerful and a permanent resting place. The landscape of the Bronze Age is a landscape that is dominated by the presence of the ancestors, by the great and the silent and the deeply sacred monuments of the burial mounds. Let us stand on a high and a wind-swept ridge overlooking the village and the fields. Here, clustered together in a silent and a timeless community, are the homes of the dead. These are the burial mounds, the barrows, the tumuli. They are great and perfectly formed and dome-shaped mounds of earth and of stone which have been built up over many generations to house the remains of the community's most important and most honored dead. A great and a powerful chieftain has died. His passing is a moment of a profound and of a communal grief, and of a deep and of a political and of a social uncertainty. And now the entire community is engaged in the great and the final and the labor-intensive work of his funeral. His body has been prepared. It may have been laid out on a grate and a wooden pyre, and it has been consumed by a sacred and a purifying fire. Or it may have been laid to rest in a simple and a stone-lined grave, a cyst, at the center of a new and a specially constructed mound. And now the community is building his final house. They are digging a grate and a circular ditch around the central grave, defining the sacred space. And the earth from this ditch is being piled up, basket by basket, to create the great and the earthen mound that will cover him. It is a colossal and a communal effort, a work that will take weeks and that will involve the labor of every able-bodied person in the village. But they are not just burying a body, they are sending a great and a powerful man on his final and his most important journey to the other world. And he must not go empty-handed. He must be equipped with all of the things that he will need to maintain his high status in the world of the spirits. And so the grave is filled with a rich and a beautiful and a carefully selected array of grave goods. His finest and his most deadly bronze sword is laid beside him, its blade polished, its hilt perhaps decorated with a precious and an imported amber, his bronze-tipped spear, his bronze axe head, his personal and his drinking vessel, a beautiful and an elaborately decorated pottery beaker, is filled with ale for his journey, and a grate and a clay storage jar is filled with a supply of grain. These objects are a profound and an economic sacrifice. The bronze sword is an object of an immense and of a practical value. To take it out of circulation, to bury it in the earth, is a huge and a deliberate and a deeply significant act of a conspicuous consumption. It is a statement about the power and the wealth of the man who has died and of the community that he has left behind. The burial mound is more than just a grave. It is a landmark. It is a permanent and a powerful and a highly visible statement on the landscape. It is a territorial marker, a claim by the community to this land, a claim that is sanctioned, and that is witnessed by their powerful and their ancestral dead. And it is a place of a continuing and of a living ritual. The community will return to these mounds on special and on sacred days to make offerings, to have feasts, to communicate with their ancestors, and to draw power and legitimacy and a sense of their own and of their collective identity from the deep and the silent and the ever-present community of the dead. The Bronze Age landscape is a landscape that is haunted and that is watched over and that is shaped by the powerful and the silent and the deeply revered presence of the ancestors. To live in this world is to live in a constant and an intimate and a deeply meaningful dialogue between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The storm's wrath. The sky, which was a clear and a benign and a cloudless blue just an hour ago, has turned a deep and a menacing and a bruised purple grey. The air, which was hot and still and heavy, is now filled with a strange and an electric and a deeply unsettling tension. A sudden and a cold and a violent wind begins to whip through the village, tearing at the thatch of the roofs and raising a swirling and a choking cloud of dust from the dry and the earthen paths. And then a low and a deep and a distant and a rumbling sound is heard, a sound that seems to come from the very belly of the earth. The storm is coming. For the people of the Bronze Age, a great and a summer thunderstorm is not a simple and a meteorological event. It is a terrifying and a deeply sacred and a supernatural drama. It is a war in the heavens, a direct and a powerful and an awe-inspiring manifestation of the wrath and of the power of their greatest and their most feared and their most respected of all gods, the sky god, the thunderer. As the first fat and heavy drops of rain begin to fall, a frantic and a desperate activity grips the village. The livestock are herded into their pens, the children are called from their games, and they are pulled into the dark, and the relative safety of the huts, the tools and the pottery and the weaving that have been left outside are hastily gathered up. The village is battening down its hatches, preparing to endure a divine and a violent and a terrifying assault. And then the storm breaks in its full fury. The sky is split by a sudden and a brilliant and a blindingly white flash of lightning, a great and a jagged and a celestial spear that seems to stab the very earth. And it is followed, a moment later, by a deafening and an earth-shattering and a terrifying crack of thunder, a sound that is not so much heard as it is felt, a deep and a percussive and a visceral blow that seems to shake the very foundations of the world. The family huddles together in the center of their small and their fragile and their reed hut. The darkness inside is absolute, broken only by the brief and the stark and the terrifying flashes of the lightning from outside, which illuminate the room in a series of strange and of ghostly and of instantaneous still lifes. In these moments they can see the wide and the terrified and the white faces of each other. The rain is now a solid and a roaring and a deafening sheet of water, a sound that is like a great and a celestial river pouring from the sky. The wind is a high and a shrieking and a demonic howl, a sound that seems to be trying to tear the very roof from their hut. This is a moment of a profound and of an absolute and of a terrifying helplessness. The people of the Bronze Age are not the masters of their world. They are the small and the fragile and the powerless subjects of a great and of an awesome and of an often incomprehensible cosmic power. All they can do is to huddle in the darkness and to wait and to pray. Their prayers are not the quiet and the contemplative prayers of the hilltop shrine. They are the desperate and the frantic and the almost unconscious pleas of a terrified child. They pray to the great and the angry sky god to be merciful, to pass them by, to take his terrible and his divine and his destructive anger elsewhere. The storm is a source of a profound and of a life-threatening danger. The lightning can strike a tree or a hut or a person, bringing an instant and a fiery death. The violent and the torrential rain can cause the nearby river to burst its banks, to flood the fields, and to destroy the precious and the life-sustaining crops. The great and the pounding hailstones that sometimes accompany these storms can flatten a field of ripe barley in a matter of minutes. But the storm is not just a destructive force, it is also a necessary and a life-giving one. The rain, which is now so terrifying, is the same rain that will, if it comes at the right time and in the right quantity, make the crops grow. The lightning is a symbol of the sky god's power, and it is a power that can be used not just to destroy, but also to fertilize and to protect. And so their fear is mixed with a deep and a profound and a sacred awe. Part 5. Night in the Bronze Age. Fire in the courtyard. The storm has passed, leaving behind a world that is washed clean and cool and dripping. The sun has set, and the deep and the velvety and the star-dusted darkness of a Bronze Age night has descended. The work of the day is done. The fears of the storm have receded, and now in the open and the communal space in the center of the village, a new and a different and a more gentle kind of fire is lit. This is the social fire, the fire of the courtyard, and it is the warm and the beating and the human heart of the Bronze Age night. This is not the small and the functional and the domestic fire of the individual hut. This is a great and a public and a celebratory bonfire. It is built in a large and a well-established and a central fire pit, and it is fed with great and with substantial logs of wood. It is a fire that is designed not just for cooking or for warmth, but for community. The entire village is gathered here. The families have emerged from their own, and their separate and their dark huts, and they have come together in this shared and this brightly lit and this welcoming space. They sit on the ground, or on low, and on wooden stools. in a great and a loose and a shifting circle around the leaping and the crackling flames. The fire is the village's temporary and its nightly sun. It pushes back the immense and the pressing and the deeply menacing darkness of the unlit and the pre-industrial night. The world for a few and for precious hours is reduced to this warm and this safe and this brightly illuminated circle. To be inside the circle is to be a part of the community, to be a part of the light. To be outside it is to be in the cold and the dark and the dangerous world of the unknown. The firelight works a kind of a gentle and a beautiful magic on the scene. It illuminates the faces of the villagers, their features softened and made more expressive by the dancing and the flickering light. It catches the glint of a bronze earring in a woman's ear, the sheen of a polished and a wooden drinking bowl. It turns the rising and the swirling smoke into a beautiful and a golden and a semi-transparent curtain through which the brilliant and the cold and the distant stars can be seen. This is the time for the social and the communal life of the village to unfold. The men, their bodies weary from the long and the hard day's work, sit and they talk. They speak of the harvest, of the state of the livestock, of the hunt. They are reaffirming the bonds of their shared and their working lives. The women too are gathered in their own and their shifting groups. They talk and they laugh and they work. Their hands are never still. Even as they talk, they are spinning wool into thread with their drop spindles, or they are weaving a colourful and a patterned braid for a belt, or they are mending a tear in a child's tunic. And this is the time for the stories. An old man, a respected, and an elder storyteller begins to speak, his voice a low and a rhythmic and a captivating growl. He tells the old and the sacred and the familiar stories of the tribe. He tells of the great and the mythical deeds of the ancestor heroes. He tells of the creation of the world, of the tricks of the clever and the animal spirits of the great and the epic battles between the gods. His stories are the village's history, its religion, its law, and its entertainment, all woven together into a single and a powerful and an oral tapestry. The children, their eyes wide in the firelight, listen with a rapt and a breathless attention. They are learning what it means to be a member of their community. They are inheriting the great and the collective and the unwritten memory of their people. The fire in the courtyard is a powerful and a beautiful and a deeply necessary ritual. It is a daily and a nightly reaffirmation of the bonds of the community. It is a place where the anxieties of the day are burned away, where the fears of the dark are held at bay, and where the separate and the individual families are melted together into a single and a warm and a brightly lit and a deeply human whole. Drums in the darkness. The fire in the courtyard burns lower, its leaping and its yellow flames giving way to a deep and a pulsing and a red glow. The stories of the elder have come to an end, leaving behind a deep and a contemplative silence. The night has deepened, and now a new and a different and a more primal and a more powerful sound begins to emerge from the darkness. It is the sound of the drums. Someone, a shaman, a priest, a master of the sacred rhythms, has brought out the village's drums. They are simple and they are powerful instruments. They are made of a hollowed-out log or of a large and a clay pot with a piece of a stretched and a dried animal skin, a hide for a drumhead. The drummer begins to play. At first, the rhythm is a slow, a simple, and a steady beat, a sound that seems to mimic the slow and the deep and the steady beat of the human heart. Boom, 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 boom. The sound is not loud, but it is deep and it is resonant. and it seems to travel not through the air, but through the ground itself, a low and a percussive and a visceral vibration that can be felt in the very bones of the listeners. The sound of the drum has a profound and a deeply transformative effect on the atmosphere of the night. The mood, which was a social and a communal one, now becomes a more sacred and a more mystical and a more inwardly focused one. The drum beat is a call, an invitation. It is a calling to the spirits of the place, to the ghosts of the ancestors, to the great and the unseen gods to come and to be present and to witness the rituals of the night. As the drummer continues to play, the rhythm begins to change. It becomes faster, more complex, more syncopated. Other percussive sounds may be added: the dry and the rattling, sound of a gourd filled with seeds, the sharp and the percussive, and the clacking sound of two and of bone or of wooden sticks being struck together. And the people begin to move. They may begin to dance. This is not the joyful and the celebratory and the social dance of a wedding feast. It is a more sacred and a more trance-like and a more ritualistic form of movement. The dancers move in a circle around the fire, their feet stomping on the packed earth in time with the driving and the powerful and the insistent beat of the drums. Their movements are repetitive and they are hypnotic, and they are designed to break down the barriers of the conscious and the rational mind and to allow the dancer to enter into a state of a spiritual and of an ecstatic trance. The drums are a powerful and a psychoactive technology. The relentless and the repetitive and the powerful rhythms can alter the state of human consciousness, can induce visions, can create a powerful and a collective and a deeply shared emotional and spiritual experience. The purpose of this drumming and of this dancing may be a specific one. It may be a ritual to ensure a successful hunt, a war dance to build the courage of the warriors before a raid, or a fertility rite to encourage the crops to grow. Or it may be a more general and a more mystical purpose. It may be a way of re-establishing the harmony between the human world and the world of the spirits, a way of recharging the spiritual batteries of the community, a way of tapping into the deep and the primal and the rhythmic energies of the cosmos itself. The sound of the drums in the darkness is the sound of the Bronze Age soul. It is a sound that speaks of a world where religion is not a matter of a quiet and of an intellectual belief, but is a full-bodied and a visceral and an ecstatic and a deeply participatory experience. It is the sound of a people who are seeking to lose themselves, to dissolve their individual and their conscious egos, and to become one with the great and the powerful and the rhythmic and the sacred pulse of the universe. The guard on the hilltop. The fire in the courtyard has died down to a bed of a grey and of a cooling ash. The sound of the drums has faded into the deep and the profound silence of the late night. The villagers have returned to their huts, and they are now in the deep and the vulnerable and the unconscious state of sleep. The village is quiet, but it is not unguarded. Let us climb once again to the highest point of the village's defences, to the crude and the wooden watchtower that is built into the palisade on the edge of the settlement. Here, in the cold and in the deep and in the lonely darkness, a single man is awake. He is the night guard, the watchman, and he is the eyes and the ears of the sleeping community. He stands on the small and the slightly swaying and the elevated platform of the watchtower, wrapped in a thick and a heavy and a very itchy woolen cloak, its hood pulled up against the biting and the nocturnal cold. The wind is a constant and a low and a mournful and a sighing presence up here, a sound that is filled with the lonely and the vast and the empty spaces of the night. His job is a simple, a monotonous, and an absolutely vital one: to watch and to listen. His gaze is fixed not on the sleeping and the familiar, and the safe village behind him, but on the great and the dark and the menacing and the unknown world that lies beyond the palisade. He is looking for any sign of a danger, for any anomaly in the familiar and the nocturnal landscape. He is looking for the faint and the distant and the unnatural flicker of a torchlight in the forest, a sign that a raiding party might be approaching. He is listening for the sound of a snapping twig, of a dislodged stone, of any sound that is not the familiar and the natural and the reassuring sound of the night. He is listening for the sound of a human footstep where no human footstep should be. His senses are heightened, sharpened by the darkness and by the profound and by the absolute silence. He can distinguish between the hoot of a normal and a hunting owl, and the hoot that is the clever and the coded and the human imitation of an owl, the signal of a scout. His only companion is the great and the silent and the wheeling tapestry of the stars above. He knows the constellations, and he uses their slow and their majestic and their predictable movement across the sky to tell the time, to mark the slow and the cold and the very long passage of his watch. The guard's vigil is a lonely and a cold and a deeply tedious one. He must fight against the overwhelming and the deeply human desire to sleep. To fall asleep on watch is the greatest and the most unforgivable of all crimes for a member of a community that is living in a state of a constant and of a low level and of a very real threat. He might chew on a bitter and on a stimulating root, or he might pace back and forth on his small platform, his own, and his deliberate and his rhythmic and his quiet movements, a way of keeping his body and his mind awake. He is the living and the breathing embodiment of the village's anxiety, of its deep and its abiding and its very sensible paranoia. He knows that his small and his relatively prosperous community, with its stores of grain and its herds of livestock and its precious and its bronze objects, is a tempting and a valuable prize for other and for hungrier and for more desperate communities. He is the thin and the fragile and the human and the woolen-clad line of defense between the safe and the sleeping and the innocent world of the village and the violent and the chaotic and the predatory world that surrounds it. His vigilance is the price of their peace, and so he stands a still and a silent and a lonely figure in the great and the cold and the windy darkness, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his hand resting on the smooth and the familiar and the reassuring shaft of his bronze-tipped spear. He is watching, he is listening, and he is waiting for the first and the faint and the deeply and the profoundly welcome grey light of the dawn. The sacred dream in the deep and the silent and the profoundly mysterious hours of the Bronze Age night. The human mind is believed to be open and to be receptive to a different and to a more powerful and to a more sacred kind of reality. Sleep is not just a biological and a restorative process. It is a journey. It is a time when the soul is believed to be able to leave the heavy and the clumsy and the physical prison of the body and to travel and to explore the great and the invisible and the often terrifying landscape of the spirit world. And the memories of this journey are the sacred and the powerful and the deeply meaningful visions of the dream. Let us lie beside the sleeping form of the chieftain in his great and his dark and his quiet hall. His body is still, his breathing is deep, and it is regular, but his soul, his psyche, his life force is on a great and a significant and a supernatural adventure. He dreams that he is standing on the top of the sacred and the ancestral burial mound. The moon is full, and it is bright, and it casts a strange and a silver and an ethereal light on the landscape. and before him, rising from the earth of the mound, is a great and a tall and a noble and a ghostly figure. It is the spirit of his own and of his dead father, the great and the heroic chieftain who came before him. The spirit of his father speaks to him. The voice is not a normal and a human voice. It is a low and a booming and a slightly echoing sound like the wind in a cave, and the spirit gives him a message. He warns him of a coming danger, of a raid that is being planned by a rival tribe from the north. He gives him a piece of a strategic and of a military advice, and he gives him a promise of his own and of his ancestral and of his spiritual support in the coming battle. The chieftain wakes with a sudden and a sharp and a breathless jolt. The vision of the dream is still burned with a perfect and a vivid and a terrifying clarity into his mind. His heart is pounding. He is drenched in a cold sweat. For the chieftain, this was not just a dream. It was not a meaningless and a random and a neurological event, a product of an undigested piece of meat. It was a real and a true and a deeply significant and a supernatural event. It was a genuine and a direct and a sacred communication from the world of the spirits. He rises from his bed and he calls for his closest and his most trusted advisors and for the village shaman or for the priest. And in the deep and the pre-dawn and the firelit darkness of the great hall, he tells them of his dream. The dream is not treated as a private and as a psychological event. It is treated as a piece of a vital and of a public and of a political and of a military intelligence. The shaman will help the chieftain to interpret the dream, to understand its symbolic and its hidden meaning. And based on this dream, the chieftain will make a real and a practical and a life and death decision. He will send out his scouts to the north. He will strengthen the defenses of the village. He will prepare his warriors for a coming battle. The sacred dream is one of the most important and the most powerful sources of knowledge and of authority and of guidance in the Bronze Age world. It is the primary way that the gods and that the spirits and that the ancestors communicate their will to the world of the living. A man who is known to have powerful and to have prophetic dreams is a man of a great and of a spiritual and of a political power. And so the night is not a time of a simple and of an unconscious rest. It is a time of a great and of a mysterious and of a sacred and of a potentially transformative activity. It is the time when the great and the important and the life-changing and the divinely inspired decisions are made. It is the time when the human world is guided and is protected and is shaped by the quiet and by the powerful and by the deeply and by the profoundly meaningful visions of the sacred dream. Dawn, again, the long and the cold and the dark and the eventful night of the Bronze Age is finally, and it is irrevocably, coming to its end. The first and the thin and the almost imperceptible and the horizontal line of a pale and a delicate and a beautiful and a pearly grey light is appearing on the eastern horizon, a slow and a quiet and an unstoppable and a miraculous and a daily victory over the profound and the overwhelming darkness of the night. And with this first and this faint and this beautiful light comes the familiar and the hopeful and the life-affirming sound of the rooster's crow. The world is waking up. Dawn is here. Let us stand one last time on the small and the windy and the sacred hilltop that overlooks our village. From this high and this privileged vantage point, we can watch the world being reborn in the soft and the cool and the pristine light of a new morning. The village below is still a collection of dark and of silent and of sleeping shapes, But now the first and the most important sign of a new day appears. From the smoke hole of a single and of a small and of a reed hut, a thin and a tentative and a pale grey wisp of smoke begins to rise. It hangs for a moment in the still and the cool and the damp morning air, a fragile and a beautiful and a deeply hopeful and a vertical line in the horizontal landscape, and then it is joined by another and another and another until the whole and the sleeping village is breathing out a dozen and more of these soft and of these gentle and of these human and of these domestic clouds. The fires are being relit, the hearts of the homes are beginning to beat again. The light grows stronger and it changes colour from a cool and a grey to a warm and a delicate and a pink and a golden. And this new and this warm light begins to pick out the details of the landscape. It catches the dew that is sparkling like a million tiny and of precious and of scattered jewels on the intricate and the beautiful and the gossamer web of a spider. It illuminates the rich and the dark and the newly ploughed earth of the fields. It glints with a sudden and with a beautiful and with a startling and with a warm and with a golden flash on the bronze tip of the spear of the night guard as he begins his weary and his relieved and his thankful walk back down the hill to his own and to his waiting home. The sounds of the new day begin to grow. The lowing of the cattle, the bleating of the sheep, the first and the sleepy and the querulous cry of a waking baby. The sounds of a life that has survived another long and another dark and another dangerous and another cold night. The sounds of a life that is beginning and that is enduring and that is continuing again. The Bronze Age is a world of a profound and of a deep and of an almost unimaginable hardship. It is a world of a back-breaking labour, of a constant and of a gnawing hunger, of a terrifying and of a violent and of an ever-present threat of death from sickness, from famine, from the sword of an enemy. But as we watch the dawn break over this small and this fragile and this deeply and this profoundly human settlement, we are reminded that it is also a world of an incredible and of an almost unbreakable resilience. It is a world of a deep and of a powerful and of a sustaining beauty. It is a world of a creative and of an explosive and of a world-changing energy. It is the world that has given us the city, the law, the wheel, the sail, the sword, the written word.